Hi Brenda, it's Professor Sasso. I hope you're having a great night and that you're not too stressed out by the end of the semester and you're ready to do your writing portfolio. We had a really good conversation about your poetry, so I'm hoping some of my suggestions tonight will help you with your stories as well. But I do have to start by saying that I think that your stories are some of the most mechanically sound stories that I've seen from a writing class. You have really perfected the format, right? So the double space, Times New Roman, all of those things, but also you just have a really good sense of English language mechanics. You know how to use dialogue, you know how to set up a scene, you give us really nice glimpses of characters, you have your name and page number on every page, which is really helpful, and it's obvious that you've this doesn't feel like, these two stories don't feel like a first draft to me, and it's either that you have a really nice natural ability to get language and story onto page, or you spent a good amount of time really constructing these before you sent them in. So congratulations to you for having two really strong, like mechanically strong rough drafts, if that makes sense. And my suggestions on both your stories are more about how we can create what I call sort of the moment of tension in both of them. So you have, what you do really well is you have great character, which is, I asked you to develop character. You have your characters interacting. You layer your characters, like even just in that first story about the Ed 500 teacher who's taking the student, who is cooking with the students. All of the students came to life through what they cooked. Like those were great details. That's how we connect with other people, and it's how we connect interpersonally in stories, is that, oh, all the little details about what each of the students made, depending on their background, gave us a really nice glimpse into those characters. So you do that really well. You also do a really nice job with setting. I can sense the spaces that we're in. They're familiar spaces. We get a good sense of people are acting in those spaces the way they usually would. Sometimes when we create stories, our imagination goes a little wild, and suddenly our characters stop behaving the way they would be behaving, and our physical spaces don't look the way they should. But you've done a really nice job of keeping it very real, keeping it detailed. So those are all things that are absolutely working for you. And when we first talked, I worried because I was like, I don't know, you made it sound like you were struggling a lot more with these stories, but I think you've produced really nice two pieces that feel really full and complete. So my suggestions to your stories have to do with finding a place of tension in each story that makes sense to that story. So let's start with the first one. I love that we start off with a student who's making her mother's Chinese egg rolls. The way to create a little bit of layer to this character in that first part, we have the father, we have the description of what she looks like, that she, that she's making a dish from China, that's in her family. She talks about her mother and her mother's dazzling smile, right? Characters can't be all good all the time, right? I mean, human beings aren't all good all the time. I wish that we were, but we're not. So you have that nice setup about the family, and I might just give us a little sense of, I think it sounds like a lovely family, but what those relationships, is there anything slightly complicated in her relationship with her parents? And can that be part of the description in any way of that first part? Just that, her dad expects too much out of her or something, something that complicates his character, because she's genuinely great and patient and awesome through the entire story. And we connect with characters not just because they're great, but because they have flaws and weaknesses as well. So I might that's one place where you might be able to complicate that character a little bit. So I love the way it starts. And then we have this so many really nice descriptions, right? I love they embrace me like a family, as if we are a pack of gum. I mean, that's a great simile, and we were working on those in poetry, and you create a couple of really nice, so much description in these stories. You know, you have Mr. Weber with the red hair and black frame glasses. We can understand him, and that he's wearing this silly bow tie with hamburgers and hot dogs and milkshakes on it. I mean, what a great detail! And I think what you did was you used real people, and real people come to life really nicely in stories. So then they're sort of preparing the meal together. The only thing I didn't believe about this character, she's a young woman and she's saying things like good grief, which, and there was a few times in the story where you have to remember that you're not writing from the perspective of a grown woman, you're writing from the perspective of a college student, and her experience with the world and her level of patience and what she says out loud in her head doesn't have the wisdom and the maturity of an older person. So I might think about reminding yourself that she's a young girl, and she might not have all of this maturity, and she certainly probably doesn't say things like good grief, right? Not that you need to make her swear, but she probably doesn't say good grief when she's overwhelmed by something. So then there's this great, you know, this piece where they're she's using the mandolin. I like that. She's dancing to Don't Stop Believin'. It almost reads a little bit like a process essay, right? We're moving through this process with her. Really great details through those pages. And then I think it becomes interesting again when she's sitting and looking at all the children, and they're all preparing these dishes, right? And we get a sense of each child by what they prepared. These details are really nice. But then we suddenly get to this moment where the story was heading in one direction, which was this young college student who's interacting with these students around food and culture. And then the car accident happens, which I know it's a true story and that's actually what happened. But I think this story is much more about, and this is where sometimes story, for the sake of fiction, has to take real story and then decide what to do with it. And I think the story really lies in her interaction with those children rather than the car accident at the end, if that makes sense. I feel like this could be, we always want story, like the climax of a story or the tension in the story to be about like an accident or something that happens, but I think you have much more of what I call an interpersonal story going here, which is that the relationships are most important and the conflict might come there, and the point of tension might happen with the people in the story rather than with this thing, you know, this car accident or something big that happens. I might, and this is the part where your imagination has to come in, I might take, you know, one of these relationships or one of these students or even the girl herself, and give them some type of interpersonal conflict. Like maybe one of these students who prepared a meal is going home to a very poor family at the end of the night, or is having depression. I know it's like a 5th grade classroom, but that one of the students has an interpersonal problem, and that's the climax of the story, that they're all preparing this meal together, and then one of the students is left out or feels isolated because of something that's happening at home or something that's happening with them, and then your student, your intern in the story, can help them out. I just feel like we have 2 different stories here. We have this really lovely setup of this young woman cooking with all these children, and then we have this car accident, right? And they don't go together for me. And I think what I cared most about in the story were those students and your main character and her Chinese parents. Let's have something happen there instead of the car accident at the end. I hope that makes sense. And in that part, in that case, I wouldn't change a whole lot of what you've written. I would just probably add some type of, like I said, interpersonal conflict to it where you don't have this car accident at the end, because it just didn't feel like it It was what the story was about. And then I really love what you did in the second story, which you took this risk, right? You wrote in the you voice, which often really doesn't work. It doesn't translate very well. But you had it set up between a daughter and a mother on the mother's birthday, and I think it was reads really lovely. I love the you voice puts us in the person's shoes in a way that the I voice doesn't, right? We are now the person this is happening to when you say you, and we feel the way this mother feels. And so to look at a mother-daughter relationship on the mother's birthday in the you voice, I think is really intimate and nice. What I wouldn't do in the story is change over, and I know you asked me this question, but I wasn't sure what you meant by it until I read your story. I would stay entirely in the mother's voice, okay? So the parts where we shift to the daughter, I would take those parts out. I would not use any I voice for the daughter. I would write the whole story from the mom. Because I think it works better that way. And I like the perspective of the daughter. I think some of those parts are really nice, but I think it works better when we just have the mom talking about her birthday with her daughter in the you voice. I think is what is the magical part of this story. So I might take out the parts where we shift over to the perspective of the daughter and just keep everything in the you voice. I love the balloon fairy. I love your details about Shannon is your one and only pumpkin, although she's not so little anymore. She's now 20 years old. She's, caring, generous soul. She's far more beautiful than you are. Like, we're like, oh, I'm the you. I get this. I feel this. The fact that people compliment them on their smiles, right? And then I would take out this part about Shannon, and I honestly don't know. This is another moment that I think it's an interpersonal story, and we're just getting this really lovely day between two characters. And even though I know that this is a true story and this is the way it really happened, this is where your editing eye has to come in, where you take some of the things out that aren't totally necessary now to the story. And I think maybe the popping the tire and going to Sam's Club is not something we really need in order to totally understand this story. I don't think there's enough tension there, really. I think them going and the goldfish moment and the fish tank, which is hilarious, I think we stay in that moment. I think that's a more important moment, the moment at dinner. So I might take the whole Sam's Club tire. It just gets a little too logistical for the sake of fiction. And the moment when they're in the restaurant and, the fish tank, I think is funny and can be sort of that moment of tension in the story, and then resolution afterwards. I don't think we need the tire. I love your description of the fish tank and the restaurant. You just have really great details. The goldfish stare at you in a frenzy right below. There are so many of them. Where did they all come from? It's just really nice detail work. Her worried about the fire department. And then you have this great, moment at the end where they're together. You laugh so hard, tears roll down your face. You smile and look at Shannon. You feel very blessed and very fortunate that, they're ending that. You put your feet up. They're ending the day together. And I almost think the story can end. You think to yourself, no worries. Your heart is full of love and you'll never be alone. Like, end on the mother saying that out loud at the end of her birthday on this beautiful day that they had together. And I think you have a really nice story there. The cool part about the second story is that you tell it from the you voice, and I keep that voice running the entire time. It's almost 15 minutes of me talking about your story, so feel free to email me or give me a call if you don't understand any of that, but I think you have two really nice pieces to work from, and you should be proud of yourself. So good luck with your final writing portfolio, and check in with me if you need anything, okay?